A new day. Here we are, rested, relaxed, and ready to move on to the next stage of this project. If you're just joining us, I am working on a 1940s suit dress sort of thing. I thought it was a two-piece, turns out it's just a dress, so I haven't decided if I'm going to sort of rework things and make it a two-piece, because I do think I'd get quite a lot of wear out of a skirt like this just on its own. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but what I need to do today is I need to mark up all my pattern pieces so that I am ready to start sewing. I reckon I will probably only get the marking up done today. I don't think I'll actually get onto any sewing, but you never know, so let's see. So I have tidied my desk and I have everything here ready to go. You may remember this from when I was drawing out the pattern. However, this is a metric pattern master and the seam allowance and everything on this vintage pattern is in imperial measurements. I do have an imperial cheapo version of that pattern master, which I got from a quilt shop, just because I wasn't going to spend a lot of money on something I knew I wasn't going to use very often. But it has come in very handy for some vintage and historical sewing things over the years. So, got my mountain of pattern pieces here. Let's leave the skirt and the sleeve for now. Onto the floor they go. There are many ways to mark up a pattern piece. You can use this kind of dressmaker's carbon paper where it's got tailor's chalk on one side and you use a pinwheel, one of these with the little points, and you go along the pattern piece and you get sort of a series of dots. However, that's a lot of downward continuous pressure, which I just find really tiring these days. This was my preferred way of doing this when I was a student and at university, when I was a bit more with it, shall we say. But now I simply just chalk them on with a chalk pencil. So they are like a refillable pencil. Oh, that bit's shattered. But you get a selection of colours. So for my toiles, I usually go for a really bright colour so that I can see what I'm doing. So on the Calico, often the ones that show off best are the blues. Put that in there so you can get a really fine point on it and get a really crisp line. So you see that? Now it's nice and sharp. Right, so naturally, Calico, we don't have a right and the wrong side, so I just tend to kind of pick one. I find if I'm marking balance marks, it's easiest to mark them on the inside, so I'm going to make the inside of this my wrong side. So then I flip them up, and I can sort of do in one motion, so I know they're definitely going to match across the seam. I always make my balance marks quite long, because I want them to match at the sewing line, which is obviously a seam allowance width in. So if I'm matching up my sewing line here and my balance mark only comes to here, that's no good to me, you know what I mean? That's particularly true with the old sleevels. Don't have a neck facing for the toiles, that probably won't matter, that one. Oh no, but that's a shoulder seam. So, where's my awl? I never used to do this. It's something I've picked up from watching other people on YouTube, but it's actually quite an efficient way to do this. Punch through the tissue paper pattern with an awl, so that you've got a nice hole. Oh, however, I'm marking the inside, aren't I? So that doesn't really help me. So I'm just going to stick a pin in. So I've pushed a pin through the hole I made with an awl, so it's through both layers, and then where it comes out, where it goes in, I'll mark with the tailor's chalk. Same again on this side. There we are. And then that's just a really accurate way to mark the important parts of the dart. So now I have a back piece which has basically got lots of little blue marks on, and we're going to connect the dots first of all for the darts. So there we have a dart, and then on every seam that I'm going to sew, I'm going to mark in the sewing line, which is a 1/2 inch. Now, if I remember rightly, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eighths, yeah, so I need to remember that and not line it up with the wrong line. Like that, I think that's right. So the benefit of using this one is it has the seam allowance around the curve as well. So I can match it up like that and get a perfect curve at 1/2 inch, which I can't on my pattern master because it's only got up to 1 centimetre seam allowance around the curve, which is not enough. So again, this shoulder seam's got a bit of a curve, so I'm going to use my curved edge. Don't think there's a part of it which matches perfectly, so I'll just go like that and then shift it along a bit. And again with the neck, I doubt we're going to get an exact fit, so we'll just that bit there, yeah, fair enough. It's one of those things, I actually think marking up is one of my favourite sewing tasks. Maybe it's just because I hate cutting out, so I look forward to it because I know it means the cutting is over. I don't know, there's just something really satisfying about it. Okay. Interesting that the back shoulder seam was so curved, but the front is really straight. Lovely. I just wanted to say thank you for your support on Monday's video. I know it was a little bit different that you normally expect from me. But honestly, I cut all that fabric and I watched back all that footage and I was like, wow, this is going to be a really sad video because it's just like 15 minutes of watching me struggle. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to have to make this funny, otherwise nobody's going to watch it. And so I didn't know if it would go down well. I mean, I did get some negative feedback, just the usual bullshit about like, oh, so negative of you as a disabled person to talk about your lived experience of living with your own disability. So I just delete comments like that. So yeah, so thank you very much, really. Maybe I'll do something else funny one day. I don't know, my experience of sewing, because I did a lot of professional workroom sewing, or like I was in a workroom a lot, obviously, when I was doing my training. When you just sew all day, every day with the same people, you just kind of go a little bit stir crazy. And so there are days when you are just like, can't even. And I do find it funny that so often a lot of sewing content online is really aesthetic and calming and pleasing. Like sewing isn't really frustrating most of the time. So I just wanted to represent that side of this craft. Okay, front done. Now it's time to crack on with the bigger pieces. Okay, let's do the sleeve first. I've got these tucks here, and they are literally tiny weeny darts to the extent that they're not marked on the pattern because they're too narrow. They're only 1/4 of an inch. So I'm wondering whether I just mark them as they have and with a line. Will I remember? Oh yeah, I'll remember. It'll be fine. Famous last words, I know. Just figured out a quicker way of doing this. Oh my God. Oh. Why do I feel like there's a load of balance marks? Yeah, there is. Okay. It's because of this. One side of the sleeve seam is obviously longer than the other as a result of these little tucks. So make sure I transfer all those balance marks. Yeah, I've had a lot of positive feedback on this series. I think a lot of the comments I've been seeing are often about how when you watch online sewing content, you kind of get a distorted view of how sewing works. You know, you think it's, like I say, relaxing and easy, and it isn't. And also you get a misrepresentation of how long these things actually take. and then you think, oh God, I'm so slow. Why am I not doing it fast enough? Why am I not good enough? I must be a terrible sewist. When the reality is, well, there's a lot of movie magic involved. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, editing can make things look much faster and smoother and easier than they were in real time. You also, of course, have the creative freedom to just cut out all the bits where it goes wrong. And I often try and leave those bits in my videos because, firstly, I think it makes interesting content, but also I know that when you're learning to sew, particularly if you're self-taught, the moments when it goes wrong are the moments when you learn something. And if you are self-taught and there's nobody to stand over you and go, oh yeah, by the way, you've sewn your sleeve in backwards, that's why it looks weird. You just have to figure all that out for yourself, which is really hard. And I have a lot of respect for people who do that and learn to sew that way. Because, you know, when I was learning to sew, I learned in a school environment, in a university environment, so I could just go and ask the teacher and be like, what have I done wrong? And they'd be like, oh, this, and this. Makes it a lot quicker and easier. So, you know, I have a lot of admiration for people who teach themselves. I don't know if this is going to work. Probably not. I think I might need... So I've gotten to this rounded out part of my sleeve head, and obviously my curved thingy doesn't go that way, but if I flip it this way I've got these holes which I can draw through, but my chalk pencil doesn't fit in them. This must be the 1/2 inch one, so this is just a cheap coloured pencil, and then I'll go over it with the chalk and join it up in a nice smooth line. I mean, do you know what? There is definitely a place for like beautiful crafting content which is completely free of frustration and it makes it look super easy and fun. So like if that's what you're into, if that's the kind of content you make, I'm not bad mouthing you here. It's just the purpose of my channel, my mission, if you like, is to encourage people to sew for themselves and to encourage people who maybe are excluded traditionally due to ability to try sewing or to take it up again and see if they can make it work for themselves. And you don't see a lot of that, and you don't see people often being honest about the frustrations of it. And I think if you do have a limited ability for whatever reason, or limited time or energy, you need to know what you're getting yourself in for. And that way you can anticipate challenges you might face, issues you might have, and work around them. Like if you know cutting's going to be a big barrier for you because it is tiring and exhausting and exasperating, then you're not going to be disheartened, or maybe you'll feel less ashamed if you have to ask for help. You know, and to me, if I can help somebody realise that and help them keep sewing, that's a win, you know? Right. Sleeves. Fin. So, funny story. When I was editing back one of these videos, I realised that I actually did some of my maths wrong, and so my seam allowances are all out by a little bit. It shouldn't be a catastrophic issue, and like I say, I'm going to have to do so many alterations to this bodice probably anyway that it'll be fine, but the skirt is what I'm nervous about, because I also didn't clock that there aren't any darts in this skirt. It's supposed to be sort of like an A-line skirt with all the shaping at the side seam, which may not be great for my shape, but I've cut it now, so there's nothing I can do about it. It's just something I thought I'd mention, being honest about my own mistakes. Yeah, I cocked up the maths. So it's like I'm like a millimetre out. No, I'm a centimetre out. So probably not enough to result in catastrophic fit problems, but something to be aware of. So I hope you all are enjoying a return to some sewing content. I know I've mostly done knitting content this year, but that's because I've been very ill. Oh, this again. Yeah, I've been very ill after I had COVID, so just haven't been up to sewing really. And knitting content, I can always reliably knit, but I can't reliably sew. So I haven't wanted to do a lot of very involved sewing projects. The sewing projects that you've seen on the channel this year, most of them were actually stitched, if you like, in 2021, and I just edited the videos in 2022. This was possibly a poor decision in terms of like the branding of my channel. I made all those knitting videos, brought in a whole load of people who were interested in knitting content, and now I'm doing a month completely dedicated to sewing content. But hopefully you'll bear with me, or hopefully you'll find something interesting as well. Or if you've been feeling neglected by all the knitting videos as a non-knitter, now's your time. It's a difficult balance to strike because I like doing both, but I know that not everybody does. And I mean, there is always the option that I start a separate channel just for knitting and just for sewing, but I don't know, I think we can make both work. Let me know what you think, basically. If you have very strong opinions either way, I'd be pleased to hear them. Was this the front or the back? Front. Before I forget. So yeah, this is one of those things that you don't often see in real time in sewing videos, on TikTok, whatever. It's taken me about an hour to do this, to mark everything up properly. I see very few makers take the time at all to do this. And, you know, you'd be justified in being like, I'm not spending an hour doing that. That seems unnecessary. But to me, it definitely makes such a difference in terms of accuracy. I mean, just can't imagine how people make toiles, make fit adjustments without all their lines drawn on. I don't know, maybe they're more accomplished than I am. One more piece. That's the right side. Thing is, the reality is I know that actually a 2-dart bodice, I've got quite a complicated sleeve, I guess. An A-line skirt, got to do the peplum. This isn't a particularly complicated dress to sew, it just has to fit nicely. So that's where I'm going to spend all my time and energy. So once I'm through the toile fitting stage, it should come together pretty quickly. Can feel the fog rolling in. Nearly there. I think that's enough for today. Thanks for watching. See you next time.